Today I wanted to talk a little bit about self-care for magic practitioners. In the same way as we have a daily routine to keep our physical bodies fresh and healthy, whatever that might involve for you, magic practitioners normally get to a point where they realize that hygiene of the subtler parts of the self is just as important, as it can get gunked up or worn down in just the same way. I was having a very interesting conversation last night with some level 2 and up members of the Foolish Fish Discord who joined me for a live Q&A, and a couple of points came up which I thought could be helpful to share more widely. Number 1, where to practice. Is it a good idea to invoke or evoke spirits at home? I thought this was an excellent question. I'm very grateful to members D and Silkweaver for bringing it up. This is my attitude. Non-physical entities aren't very different from people in the way I relate to them. There are some people that I'm very excited to meet, but I wouldn't necessarily allow into my house. There are some people who are introduced to me by friends, and I might invite them into certain areas of my house on the recommendation of a close friend. And there are long-standing friends whom I've known for a long time and with whom I've developed a great amount of trust. And those people I might occasionally allow into the areas of my house where I let my guard down, like my bedroom or my bathroom and so on. Non-physical entities, just like people, have a particular energy about them. And that energy lingers after they've left. This is why if there's an entity that I'm not familiar with, that I want to interact with, I'll normally try to do that as far away from the places where I let my guard down as possible. Sometimes I might be fortunate enough to be able to get to a forest or a secluded place of some kind. I've considered renting an apartment for these purposes, though both financial and moral considerations have held me back. Sullying someone else's property and so on is just not a particularly nice thing to do. There's also the consideration of whether a particular entity will be willing or even able to enter the realm which you've charged with your own energies, by which I mean your home, the place where you exist most authentically as yourself. That might be an ideal setting for certain entities, but also naturally it might be a completely opposite to ideal setting for other entities. As an analogy, a meth addict may feel out of place in Fortnum and Mason's top floor tea rooms, and in the same way, the Queen of England may feel uncomfortable in a squat. One way or another, if you feel that you've let an entity into your inner sanctum that you wish that you hadn't, the cleansing process is normally quite straightforward. Please note here that I'm talking about ridding a place of lingering energies and vibrations. I'm not talking about ridding a place from a parasitic entity that doesn't wish to leave. That can be much trickier, and I'd refer you to Josephine McCarthy's The Exorcist's Handbook, and also to Lesson 7 from her excellent Quareia Apprentice volume for more details on that topic. I'm talking about cleansing a space after the departure of an entity whose energies may be at odds with the kinds of energies that you're trying to cultivate within your home. Then the well-worn technique of smudging with white sage is loved by many and known to work very well. Some people like to perform the lesser banishing ritual of the pentagram, though you probably already know that I have unconventional opinions about the purpose, or purposes, of the LBRP, though that may work perfectly for you. I also recommend, as always, Damon Brand's Magickal Protection, which describes very effective rituals for cleansing a space. And finally, I'll refer you to that 7th lesson of the Quareia Apprentice volume once again for more great ideas for ritually cleansing spaces involving all the senses, so music, drumming, essential oils, declamations and declarations, and so on. Number 2, manage your own energies. People from all walks of life, a wide range of backgrounds, personalities, sensory preferences, are attracted to the kinds of areas that this channel mostly deals with. But it may be safe to say that there's a higher proportion of introverts to be found reading the kinds of books that I present here and watching the kinds of videos that I make than there are to be found, say, at a sports arena on a Saturday afternoon or in any given nightclub on a Saturday night. Not that introverts don't enjoy those activities, of course. I'm only giving these as examples to contrast with the maybe inordinate proportion of introverts versus extroverts in the world of magical practice. One of the most useful things that I did in my early 20s was purchase a book called The Highly Sensitive Person: How to Survive and Thrive When the World Overwhelms You by Elaine Aron, PhD. Now, at the time, that book didn't have a cover that made it look like it was written for heptagenarian cat ladies. And of course, there's nothing fundamentally wrong with that, but a cover like that certainly does reduce the target audience somewhat. Alternatively, you can pay over 4 times the price for a cover that you might feel less self-conscious reading in public. Of course, that's all up to you. But just like Sally Kempton's Meditation for the Love of It, which is another book which I bring up regularly as an example of why we shouldn't judge a book by its cover, this is a book which I always highly recommend, regardless of its flowery exterior, because it's one of the foundational books which helped me to understand myself in the early days of my self-exploration. As I say, I'm pretty grateful that the cover at the time was less awful. Now, of course, not everyone watching this video will benefit personally from reading this particular book, but understanding that there's one portion of the population who gain energy from high sensory input activities like social interactions, for example, and another portion of the population whose energy is depleted during social interactions, helped me to realize that my preference to stay away from large social events wasn't necessarily the pathological flaw to be overcome that some would have had me believe it was, and that the fact that I'm probably whatever the opposite of shy is, and I think I'm actually what some might describe as very sociable and very good with people. It's got nothing to do with the fact that I'm simply one of those people who lose energy as a result of social interaction rather than gain energy as many, if not most, people do. Now, this doesn't mean that I don't want social interactions at times. I need social interactions just as anyone does. But I've learned to keep an eye on my own batteries when I'm getting that social interaction, since getting social interaction, even with my closest friends, comes at a real cost. And back in the day when I hadn't yet learned about that cost, I'd frequently run out of that social energy, and I'd start getting anxious and turn inward and suddenly appear really unsociable. That's obviously not ideal for making and keeping friends. But I've since learned to stand up for myself when I feel that those energy levels are getting low, and I've worked out strategies to be able to just excuse myself when this happens without making anyone else feel like it's somehow their fault or that it's a bad thing in any way. There's a plethora of books out there which will teach you all the steps to take to develop the assertiveness you need to just be able to make sure you're okay in this area of your life, with little exercises to build that up slowly and surely over time. Number 3, get grounded. This is one recommendation which you can't really afford to ignore. Your mental health and your physical health, both of which are naturally deeply entangled with your spiritual health, fully depend on it. My advice for this third point is to find an activity, or preferably several activities, that involve you interacting exclusively with the physical realm. This may include any number of hobbies, but what's most important is that it forces your attention to be 100% fixed on something which is outside of yourself. This means that artistic activities such as figurative drawing and painting, woodcraft, sculpting, carving, metallurgy, architecture, fashion design, interior design, all of these work really great because while you naturally have to draw inspiration from inside, the execution forces your attention outward for long stretches at a time. More abstract forms of art are not what you're looking for here. Not to say that you can't practice them, of course, but they won't fulfill your need for an externally directed activity. You might also decide to pick a sport, which is a great choice as it keeps your body healthy too. However, once again, you'll want to pick a sport which focuses your attention outwards, such as maybe tennis, fencing if you can afford it, any of the team sports, any sport which focuses on your reflexes and so on. Whereas internally focused activities like Tai Chi, yoga, long distance running, once again, those are not going to be the activities that fulfill this particular need. Well, they're obviously highly recommended for other reasons, just not for this particular reason. Pick something that you already love, or that you think you could learn to love with time and practice, and that you know that you want to get good at. Learn to play an instrument, that sort of thing. Whatever arouses your interest, just be sure that it's the kind of thing that focuses your attention outwards for potentially hours at a time, but at least for a few minutes every day. The path of the mage isn't the same as the path of the ascetic, and we rely on our bodily and mental health to discern our way. It's important to maintain the tools which allow us to do that. Number 4, find your own space. Ready-made magical practices are a fantastic resource for beginners in the field who want an example of what works. However, it's up to each and every one of us to work out what our own ideal practice might look like. As humans, we're not clones of each other, and probably more to the point, we don't all have the same background experience. And therefore, we don't all make the same associations, which is why it's important at some point for the magician who has been following a particular ready-made curriculum to analyze the work that they're doing and at least attempt to determine what the intention of the curriculum is, and then to reproduce it in a way that works optimally for him or herself. This is the final bit of advice in this video, but by no means the least important, as I'm aware of so many magic practitioners who insist on a, well, self-sabotaging practice because, in quotes, it's the right way. Let me insist one more time on the fact that the right way for me doesn't in any way have to be the right way for you. Start with tradition, by all means. Tradition is tradition for good reason. But if you can work with tradition for long enough to be able to spot its flaws and fix them, then you're really starting to practice magic. And the resulting practice that you end up with will be something that you can defend to yourself in times of doubt, and that you will understand well enough to build on without needing anyone else's advice, because you will be the greatest expert at your system. Thank you so much for spending a bit of time with me today exploring this topic. If you enjoyed the video, please remember to leave a thumbs up and subscribe if you haven't done so already. Special thanks as always go out to all of my dear members. Thank you all for your generous support. If you're interested in finding out more about membership and how they get to access the Foolish Fish Discord, where they get to chat and swap magical questions and recommendations with other like-minded people, you can click on the join button just next to the subscribe button, or you can click on the link in the description. Thanks in particular to my level 3 members, the Magister Venerabilis members, this week being Alex Bogorad, Freddy Zamora, Nia the Erner, Frater Demianus, Frater VPF, JP Ferraccio, Aristarchus, Silkweaver, Will C, Distorted Waves, Living Ritual, Inga Oyas, L West, Jason, Byron Marmol, Lucky Boots, H Happy, SMQAI, Michael Dunn, Alessio Di Gino, Raonei, Youssef Saber, L Harper, Connor Smith, Christopher Kunchik, B, Replicator 44, Tara Nicholson, Ricardo Colomé, Ras Skill YO, Oskule Intin, Amanda Mayer, Farion 1, Justin Lloyd, King Rainbow, Eleonora F, Jorge Salas, Luis Mancilia, Ian Smith, Osvaldo González Núñez, Fernando Martín del Campo, Robert Mahoney, Alvin A, VX, Frater D Lane, Sven Rollick, A Million Ways, Alexander Carval, Sheridan, Not Sure, Andrew Kudlak, Mateusz Sadowski, Mrs. C.Y., Medusa of Chaos, Seidr, Matu, Merrily Duffy, Meta Gordy, Damnatio Memoriae, Suncat, Ted Kaiser, J. Joseph Safi, Kyle Walker, Roluch Ashron, Charbon, Patrick, Arcantum by Mr. Friborg, The Jade Ghost, Timothy Owens, and Z. Daniel Barnett. Thanks as always for watching, and see you very soon with another video. Bye bye.